Hello. Gonna be a fun one today. I've spent the last month or so driving around with a blown steering rack on my delica. So I've been trying to find seals. No one is willing to even look in a book to see if they have any seals possibly in stock that are compatible. I've contacted a couple of specialists. No. They also don't want to know about it. I looked into having a steering rack reconditioned. It can be done for around about, I think it was £250. The problem was, I would have to remove my steering rack and send it off. Now, that was all well and good, but I didn't want to be without a car. I mean, as much as my shoulders are killing me, I need to be able to do the shopping and stuff. I've got 7 dogs. You can't get my weekly dog food shopping into a small car, and I don't think a taxi driver would be too impressed. So I thought I would buy a rack that was described as kind of naff but whole. The problem was, they've told me this is an l400 steering rack. However, I know full well it is not for my l400 if it is for an l400, because usually here there are 2 cast-in bush bolt mounting holes, which this one doesn't have. So next I thought I need to get hold of a steering rack, and for a crappy second-hand one, a certain eBay store that specialises in Mitsubishi bits, as it were, Mitsubishi parts, wanted 300 quid for a second-hand steering rack. Luckily I went a different route, and I went onto the Mitsubishi Delica owners group, mdoc.co.uk, MDIC, Mitsubishi Delica's owners club. I've been a part of it for years, obviously, because they constantly break and they constantly need work. They're all like 30 years old and more. So this just came in the post. I paid £50 for the rack and £25 for postage because it was a long drive. And anyone who owns a Delica knows full well they're not very economical on fuel, and also right now with no power steering, there is no way I'm driving 100 miles because my arms would fall off. Therefore I paid £25 postage. Now, I opened this last night when it came and it looked okay. I've got to take the gaiters and that off, and I'm just going to quickly inspect the rack, and I want to show you how to inspect the rack, sort of thing, because the last thing I want to do is potentially put this steering rack on my car and for it to be naff as well. I've done this job once before because I had 35-inch tyres on my other Delica, and unfortunately I was sort of dry steering. I didn't realise the tyre was pressed up tight against the wall on my driveway, and the ram just blew the seals out. Probably also didn't help having massive great tyres on it that were I think they're about 12-inch wide. They were huge. After that I actually lowered the car. So we're going to inspect this now. Okay, there's some other bits in there that I didn't even realise. I thought they were packaging. One of the key things you want to look for when you're going to put a second-hand steering rack on is, firstly, if the gaiters are intact on the track rods, then there's no huge amounts of leakage. As on my car currently, my gaiter popped because it got blown up like a balloon and just burst, because I had the gaiter done up extremely tight. So they were intact. Next thing is to check inside of them, see if there's any traces of hydraulic fluid and that. You'll pretty much be able to tell if they're absolutely soaking inside. But you've got to be aware that the far end away from where the power steering box is should be dry, but the end of the power steering box will have some grease because you have the rack and the pinion inside of there, but it should be grease and not like watery fluid. However, you also might have had water get inside of the gator, and that could also make it seem a little bit watery. So I sniff tested it, and it smelled sort of greasy rather than oily. So yeah, visually inspecting this, it seems fine. This will go one of two ways. It will work or it won't. I just thought I would love to be able to test these seals before I spend hours taking my steering rack out and popping in this one. Now, what I've got here, I will take you off of the tripod for this. What we have here is the rack. The seal, the gator on the ram side was fine, there was no oil, no leakage. There was some questionable fluid here, but I'm just thinking, you know, the rack and pinions there, it might just be grease. I'm pretty sure I've connected this up to the right one. What this is a just a normal hydraulic hand power pack, and I'm hoping I can pressurise this to test the seals on that. See if we can get this as a shot where you can see the pressure gauge and potentially the steering rack. Good news is I'm not leaking any oil yet. Well, it's building pressure now. Right. So, I don't know if you can be able to see this or not, but we're at about 100. 100 bar. There's no leakage. God, fucking hell. Let's just see if I can show you this going up a little bit. So whilst this isn't a professional sort of setup, it's one that a DIYer can use if you just want to be certain that the seals aren't leaking. I tested both sides of this steering rack and both of them tested fine up to around about 120, 150 bar. I think a car power steering system can run up to about 200 bar, I'm not certain. But even so, I had left them pressurised for a little while at a time and I had no leaks, nothing seeping out, so I figured it would work. Well, it's a sign that the rack is worth the hassle of fitting. So that's what I'm going to do tomorrow. That to me says the rack's all good. I can carry on.